You can still see my back.
Trying to check the box capacity here. I don't know if we fully got but yeah, this is the Packster 70. This bike's just awesome. One thing notable, it's just massive, the box here, especially compared to some of the other ones. I mean, even I would argue that this box is probably larger than the Packster 80, which is kind of interesting because the bed is smaller, but the overall capacity seems to be larger. A lot of people have been asking about this review, and I'm excited to be sharing this bike with you today and just kind of diving in a little bit deeper. Now I got some time to ride the bike and just, I'll share some of my experiences, talk, about some of the different features of the bike, and let's get into it. So the Riese and Muller Packster was initially introduced in like 2016, 2017 when Riese and Muller initially came to the US. So they've had several different models. This particular one replaces the Packster 6080, and they just kind of split the difference and did a 70. And given the capacity of this box, I think that it just is pretty practical. I mean, they still have the Packster 40, which is their slightly shorter version. And then they also have another front loader cargo bike, which is called the Load, more specifically the Load 60 and the Load 75. These numbers, you might be wondering, describes the length of the bed up front. They have two front loader cargo bikes. What's the difference between those two? And front loader meaning that the cargo is in the front and the rider's in the back, where you have other bikes where maybe the cargo is in the back of the bike. The Packster would be considered a hardtail, given that it doesn't have rear suspension, and then the Load is a full suspension cargo bike, and really one of the only ones of its type. The Load is kind of a personal favorite of mine, but actually this Packster is really pulling for my attention with some of these new design innovations that they've included here. Some other things that are slightly different between those two is that the Load is available as high speed and this one's not, which that's something that is important to some people, but I think, if you're really loading this thing up with kids, maybe that's not such an important detail to you. This bike in particular, has some features for kids that really a lot of other bikes don't have, and we're going to talk about them. They completely redesigned the frame. As I said, the size is a bit different. The steering is different on the bike, which is a big innovation, and really the ride experience is quite different because they use cable steering. It's just very responsive. You just feel very in control. I really appreciate it, and the turning radius is dramatically improved, which is kind of nice. Has a new Bosch motor on it, so this has the Generation 4 cargo line motor, 85 Newton meters of torque, really powerful. And then 3 different drivetrains. So this particular one is the Vario. Probably would be one of the more popular versions because you get that belt drive, low maintenance, everything like that. You do have an option to upgrade this drivetrain or have another option with this specific drivetrain and to get it in the fully automatic shifting version. So that's electronically shifted, and basically all you worry about is just riding the bike and it shifts the gears automatically. So I think some people really appreciate that, especially people maybe you're not a serious cyclist. You just want to not worry about that and just focus on taking care of your cargo and focus on where you're going. And then they have the touring version for those that want more of that traditional mountain bike type gears. You have just a regular derailleur and chain. It can carry 2 kids in the front, or you can have an optional seat for a third child seat. And in theory, you could even put an additional child seat on the rear rack here because the weight capacity is up to 65 pounds. Knowing the way that the Germans are, they really tend to kind of over test things, so I appreciate that. So this can accommodate a normal child seat, and it's going to be sturdy to hold that there. Let's get into some of the other little details on the bike, and we'll get to explain some of those different things. And if you do want to check any of the specific parts of the video, we will have links to time codes below, so if you wanted to kind of review that, that's a helpful way just to kind of skip around. But I hope that you enjoy just the complete video, and we'll get into it. So starting with the wheels on the bike, we have a 20-inch wheel in the front and a 27.5-inch in the rear. For the tires, we have the Schwalbe Big Bend Plus up front, which has really good puncture protection. It's a relatively wide tire, which provides a lot of traction, and it's got a nice tread to it. Now in the rear, it has a different model tire, but kind of similar in a lot of ways. That's the Supermoto X. So similar level of puncture protection, slightly wider. This is a 20 by 2.15, and in the rear we have a 27.5 by 2.4, so slightly wider in the rear, but I find that these tires are very well suited for this bike. But the nice thing is, if you wanted to put different tires or, you know, for different types of terrain, you do have the option to go with the GX version, which is kind of the more off-road style. This size is pretty common as well, so you could probably get all sorts of different tires if you wanted to do something different. I mean, we've seen people might even want to do something for the winter and get some studded tires or something like that. That's definitely an option. And I think that this bike would be well suited for that, with this like kind of more like insulated box with the cover and everything like that. It could work well. It's got a Thru axle up front with this Suntour Mobi A32 cargo version of the front fork. Now this is a coil spring fork. It is pretty easily adjustable with these knobs here, so you can adjust the preload on the suspension. So if you have a heavier load up here, you might want to tighten these up. If you have a lighter load, you can loosen these up, and you want to keep these consistent between the two suspension stanchions there. This fender is upgraded or kind of redesigned for this year. It's kind of interesting the way it's set up, and I found this to be strange that they put the fender stay up front here, but it actually works well. And from what had been explained to me is that the idea behind this is that it's actually protecting the front light from getting that spray when you're riding in the rain or the snow or whatever the case may be, so you can actually keep that really clean. And potentially, if you're riding in the rain, you don't have a cover or something like that, it's not, whatever you have is not spraying up into the passengers or the rider and that sort of thing. So I think that's kind of cool. So as you see, we got the pretty good sized Shwalbe Supermoto X tire in the rear, and we have the new frame design here, which one of the challenges to overcome with this new motor is that they couldn't use this upper chainstay that they had used on the previous version of the Packster. So they had to find this innovative way to split the frame here to allow for the use of the belt. It's a really nice setup there, and they use this on the Charger 3 and the Supercharger 2 and some of the other models. So now this is the Vario version, so we have the continually variable transmission. This is a 380-degree gear range. What's special about the Enviolo CVT is that you can change the gears very easily when you're not pedaling. It's continuous, so you don't have normal steps that you would on a traditional gear system. You know, basically with the traditional gears, you will click into the individual gears, whether it's like 8 or 9 or 10 or up to 12 or 13 these days, or even like the roll-off that had 14 speeds. But the way I usually describe it best is that this works kind of more like a volume dial, and then you can adjust it more gradually, where the traditional gears is more like an old school channel clicker, if you will. Some other little details while we're back here, you could see that this has this like belt snubber, it's called, which basically kind of holds the belt in place and kind of keeps it firmly secured there. That's another nice thing about this drivetrain, is it does allow for the use of this Gates carbon belt drive, which is very low maintenance, very clean, and I think a lot of people really appreciate that. And not to mention, it also lasts quite a bit longer than a traditional chain. This definitely seems to be the option when people are given it over a traditional chain. But I think the chain still has its merits. So they do have the touring version, and that's going to be a little bit more sporty, a little bit more efficient, so give you a little bit more of that traditional mountain bike style feel. So it really depends on all what you're into and what's important to you. But I think it's nice to have those options. And as I mentioned before, they do have this one other version, which is the fully automatic version, and that's really been growing in popularity. So we've offered several bikes with this in the past, and a lot of people really appreciate that. I enjoy it. It's nice just to be able to ride and not think about shifting the gears, kind of as we do in many automobiles today. And you have an automatic transmission, you just drive, you push on the gas pedal, and so similarly here, you would just push on the pedals, but you're not worried about shifting the gears like a manual transmission. So one thing you might notice if you were to compare this bike from the previous Packster is that it has this larger chainring. The previous version had a smaller chainring, And that's because this motor has changed. So this is the Bosch Generation 4 cargo line motor, and you'll find this on all versions of the Packster 70. They basically changed this chainring because they removed the reduction gear that they had previously. This allows the motor to operate a little bit easier when pedaling without power. It makes the motor smaller, and this new version, they were able to do all that while still adding some additional torque to it. So this has 85 Newton meters of torque, the most amount of torque that you're going to find in the Bosch lineup, and also the most amount of assistance possibilities. There's actually 400% assistance at the max level, so pretty considerable. It's a 350 watt motor. Here in the US, it's a 20 mile an hour top speed, but in other places, it's going to be 25 kilometers, which is about 15.5 miles per hour. So really depends on where you're located. But as I mentioned before, all these are going to be that standard configuration on the motor system. But if you did want like a faster bike, they do have the Riese and Muller Load, which is available also in that high-speed motor. But I think this just makes a lot of sense for this setup. I did find, actually, when I was riding this bike, that I found myself going above that on this bike, the 20 mile an hour limit, and I didn't really find too much trouble pedaling at all. You know, I got up, 22, 23 miles an hour, and I could sustain that pretty easily, which I found that was pretty nice. So you can see that's really nicely integrated into the frame here. And one thing I should note, if you've watched any of my previous reviews talking about the cargo line, I kind of knocked it a little bit because I found like it wasn't quite as sporty as the traditional CX motor. They did perform an update on this motor system, and it performs much better now, so you have a little bit more of that peppiness off the line. I think historically they made it more for this like commercial application, and maybe they didn't want it as sporty per se, but now it does perform really well, and I wouldn't have any trouble recommending to opt for this motor. Some other little details, should just mention the Bosch system uses technology called pedal assist. You might be wondering, like, how does this thing actually work? Like, how does it provide power? So inside the motor, there's two sensors. There's a sensor that senses how fast you're pedaling. There's another one that senses how hard you're pedaling. And it actually senses about 1,000 times per second. There's one other sensor that's included here. It's on the rear wheel, and that's actually the speed sensor. So it's sensing how fast the bike is going overall. Based on all this information, it provides assistance. Now, it could provide anywhere from no assistance, riding with no power, riding just like a normal bike, or on the top level of assistance at 400%. That's the top mode there at turbo. That's pretty dramatic. Sometimes people say, like, I'm concerned, like maybe I get too tired, I don't want to work. Some people say, like, oh, I want to have a throttle, which is another option, but not usually found on like higher quality bikes. But I found really with the higher level of assistance, you really have to work very little. So I don't think that you should really miss having a throttle, and especially having the more intuitive use of the pedal assist, it works really well. Some other little things, just while we're down here, you can see, just really nice integration of the motor system, really nice integration of the cabling and everything like that, and they have these little like access screws. It's nice for service, but just really super clean design, a lot of innovation here. I should note that the frame, it's available in 3 different colors. This is the chili matte color. It's also available in a coal gray color, which is also kind of like a matte color. And then it's available in a gloss white color, which they call pure white. So in first glance, looking at the bike, you might be wondering, where does it actually get its power? Where are the batteries located? And they actually integrate them into the frame. And this is the compartment here. Actually, there's a lot of these integrations. One is this glove box that they have here. So I'm just gonna pull this out, which I actually store the key in here. This bike can get up to 2 625 watt hour batteries, which is pretty awesome. So actually, just gonna pull this out here, and the battery just slides out. So basically they have this little plastic addition here. This is a proprietary part for Riese and Muller, allows them to integrate into their frame, and I guess they just added this little bit of padding so there's no sort of bouncing around inside there. This is where the battery plugs in. Now you can charge the battery on or off the bike. If you wanted to charge it on the bike, you use this little port here. They have this little button so you can get an indication of how much charge the bike has. But you can also charge the batteries on the bike, and they have a really nice port integrated into the box there. So we're just going to slide this back into place here, and actually do need the key to lock this in place. Now you might note you see this little portion here, so we're just going to turn this, push it back in place, and lock it there. And I'm just going to put this back in here for now. But I should note that while we're talking about the key, this does have a frame lock on the rear wheel, which uses the same key. The batteries on both sides will use the same key. And you can add additional locks if you wanted to with that same key, because it uses this ABIS Plus system, which is really quite nice. But getting back to the battery specifically, it comes standard with one 500 watt-hour battery, which is usually good for somewhere like 20 to 40 miles, probably in a cargo bike, depending on what assistance level you use, but really that's going to vary. Bosch actually has this really nice range calculator on their website, so you can see exactly how much range you might get out of the bike given your specific use scenario and conditions, because that's really going to vary. If you had those two 625 watt-hour batteries, I mean, you're going to get a significant range. I'll show you in a moment when we look at the display. You can tell actually how much range you have left on the bike, so you can get a good calculation there. Yeah, I think this innovation of putting these batteries down here really makes a lot of sense. Having weight lower was really helpful. I found that handling on the bike is really great even when the box is empty. I think that's sometimes you often find with the front loader cargo bikes, is that it seems like when the box is empty, the front wheel can tend to bounce around a little bit, but to have this extra couple of pounds up front is helpful, especially on the lower part of the frame of the bike. So while we're down here, I wanted to show this new kickstand that they have. It's really pretty cool. I mean, it's super beefy, proprietary for them, as you know, I guess most of their other ones have been, but they made some really nice improvements to it. So I'm just going to kind of put it up for a second just to show you. So you can see it pops up really nicely, and to put it down, you're just going to put your foot here, and it requires very little effort to actually deploy the kickstand. So you just kind of put your foot down and just pull the bike back, and that's it. And at this point, the bike is super stable, and stable enough even to have, you know, children to kind of climb in and out of it and that sort of thing. But I'd say still it's probably a good idea to just support the bike with your hands while doing so, just to give that a little extra stability. The charge port, which is very nicely integrated into the frame. I really appreciate this because normally you kind of have to like bend down and fiddle to get into the charging area, but this is just very conveniently located. It kind of reminds me of like an electric car or something like that, like where the gas cap is. It's like pretty ergonomically located there. So the steering in action a little bit here. You have this Cane Creek headset, which is specifically made for cargo bikes, and it really handles quite well. But this cable steering, I gotta say, this is a really nice innovation here. I found that the handling on this bike with that works quite well. I mean, speaking of the details, I just love all these little pieces that they put here. I mean, like the integrated reflectors here. They got their logo stamped into the box here. They have the little step, which is actually made for kids to easily climb inside of the box there. And I should note that this EPP material is really well insulated as well. So this box is actually would work well for a commercial application as well if you needed to keep something warm or cold. And they do have a hard cover for that, but we'll get into the accessories on that in just a moment. So for the rear rack on the bike, as we're starting to see carried over some of their different models, we have the MIK system, which is a really nice, easy to clip in and out of. This is specifically the MIK HD, which is made to accommodate a heavier weight. So this is 27 kilograms, which I think is about 65 pounds, and actually works really well for a child seat. There are some child seats that are specifically made to work with this system. I'm not aware of any that are actually available in the US at the moment, but I think that we might see that in the future. I imagine in other markets in Europe, you probably see that first because this is more of a European focused system. But we do have the plates, and there's different things that you can do with that. You have this like bibia strap, which is really nice, adjustable. And I think just having that heavier weight capacity and the ability to carry something on the back is really nice, because sometimes maybe you have a another child you want to put on there, or you know, maybe it's a transitional sort of thing that the child works in the child seat, but then eventually you'll put them in the box. And we have the Supernova tail light. Again, this is part of the performance package, but the standard light works quite well as well. So while we're back here, we could check out, you see the ABIS 5750 Shield Plus lock. I'll just show how that works. Again, you know, as I mentioned, it does use the same key. So basically, if we just stick the key in here, and basically we just turn the key, and we can lock the lock. Generally, I wouldn't want to lock it here because it's actually right next to the valve stem for the tube, but you know, for this example, I'll just leave it there, and then yeah, you can remove the key, but I'm just going to unlock it, just be turning it that way, and that's it. Normally I wouldn't store the key in the glove box, but I guess when you're riding it's fine, you just take it with you once you lock it up. And then this cafe lock also has the option to add an additional chain, which is really nice. So that's good for these kind of quick, simple lockups. Maybe you're you know, in a location like this, you're at a playground or something like that, you just want to prevent somebody from running off with the bike. Using that chain to lock it to a bike rack works well. And then the saddle and seat posts, we have the Selle Royale Lookin saddle on here. I'm always a big fan of this one, and you'll see this on most of their models. Now this does have a suspension seat post, but this is specific again to the performance model. So that's kind of an upgrade. When you do get the performance package, you're going to get that suspension seat post, which I really appreciate. But there's definitely other options on the market if you wanted to add it to the standard version. Perhaps models that could even be better, but I found that even for a standard telescoping suspension seat post, this one does perform really well. So as we come up to the handlebars, you can see the display. This is the standard display that comes with the bike. It's called the Purion. The bike's also available with two other display options. You can get the smartphone hub or the Nyon display. Now the smartphone hub's not going to be available with the automatic version, but it is available with the Vario as this bike or the touring version. Basically, to turn the display on, we just tap the power button. Now all the basic functions are going to be the same throughout those displays, but the smartphone hub is going to use your phone as the display and give you some additional functionality there. And then the Nyon display is just a larger display that's going to give you some navigation and some other sort of health tracking details and stuff like that. We did do detailed reviews of those specific components, so if you wanted to get deeper into how those work, I definitely recommend checking that out. But this is a display. This is what you'll see. Miles per hour, you can change that to kilometers per hour. By default, it's going to be off. This is something specific to the US. You can cycle through this different information down here below. So you have the tripometer, the odometer, then you have the range. The range is going to vary depending on what assistance level you're on. Right now it's off, so you have really infinite range as you go up to the first level of assistance. See, 134 miles. That's pretty dramatic, but this does have the two 625 watt-hour batteries. As I said, you know, the range varies depending on the assist level you go. So as you go up to the different ones, Tour, Sport, and then turbo mode, and the max assist, you see 65 miles. But really this depends on how you ride, how fast you ride, the terrain, etc. And that's all gonna kind of vary there. And hold this down for another, and we could just see the assist level that we're in, and that's really it. So yeah, that's the basic details of the display. You do have a walk assist, which is another basic function. That's the button under here. So basically the way that works is you just basically tap that button and then hold the plus button, and that's going to basically move the bike forward, and it goes kind of a couple miles an hour, really just enough to kind of walk the bike through a park or a crowded area, or perhaps walk it upstairs, that sort of thing. But it's not really intended to be ridden with this walk assist. It's not a throttle or anything like that. It's just to allow you to operate the bike in that way. Some other little details while we're here you can check out. We have the high beam here. Now again, this is specific to that M99 Pro light that you're going to find with the performance upgrade package, but you can tap that on and off, and that's going to just give you a bit more power to the lights there. You have these ergon grips, and this is the standard handlebar setup, but they do have this comfort option, which gives a slightly more swept back handlebar with a little bit more of a cushioned saddle. But I find that the standard one works really well, and you do have some adjustment if you wanted to get the handlebars up a little bit higher and sit in a more upright position, or really it might just be the case that you're sharing the bike between different rider heights. You have this really cool adjustable stem, so you could just open this lever and pop the handlebars up, and you could adjust it to whatever height that you might need. You know, maybe you're sharing between different rider heights. That's one thing I should note, that this bike, they did lower the standover height a little bit on the frame, so you can accommodate shorter riders a little bit easier. Without the suspension post, I think you can start probably riders in the 5-foot range or that sort of thing, but you can really go upwards of 6'5" or so, potentially higher with some adjustments there with maybe the handlebars and seat posts and that sort of thing. But it's nice to have that flexibility with the different adjustments on the bike. Some other cool things, just while we're up here, you can see that they actually like integrated the cabling into the frame a little bit. I think that's really overall the trend. Things seem to be going in that direction, just more and more integration, cleaner lines, that sort of stuff. So while we're up here, I just wanted to show the shifter for the Enviolo hub. So basically, as you shift this away from you, you could see this little guy kind of like going up a hill. Basically, that means that it's going to a lower gear. As you twist it towards you, this is going into a higher gear. So easier to pedal, harder to pedal, just kind of in simple terms. And you have the bell here and these upgraded brake levers. Again, for that sport package, but the standard ones work really well also. Now the bike comes standard with the Tektro Origo Comp brakes, but this one in particular has the performance upgrade package, which has these cargo bike specific brakes with upgraded rotors, some other details like upgraded lights on the bike. The standard stuff really is quite sufficient, but all of them are going to be hydraulic disc brakes, really plenty of stopping power. But maybe if you really want to ride a bit more sporty, you're riding really large hills, you want the better lighting and stuff like that for riding at night, you might want to consider that upgrade, which is you know, a little more than $500 for those options. But I think it's definitely a good value, considering the light alone is several $100s. So plenty of stopping power. I love to see that we're seeing more and more components specific to cargo bikes starting to pop up into the market, because historically we just use like the best mountain bike parts you can get. And you could see up front, you just have this really beefy rotor, and it's pretty thick. That's actually one of the upgrades with this performance package. And then you have the upgraded headlight as well, which is the Supernova M99 Pro, and it's a very powerful light. And it also has a high beam on it, which is switchable from up on the handlebars, which is a really cool design. I guess we saved the best for last. I don't know if you say that they're the best, but it's really one of the most impressive parts about the bike is really all the configurations available inside this box and all the innovations that they brought to this. You know, this new EPP box with all this additional supports. And you might look at these like say, oh, these look like, you know, just handles for the kids. But, you know, something I showed you before, you have that step on the outside for the kid to step in. This is actually a step on the inside as well, just to make it a little bit easier if the kids' legs are shorter or something like that. But certainly ability to hold on when they're inside the bike, you're taking a sharp turn or something like that. In the car, we used to call these a OS handle. I'm not going to say that word, but yeah, you get the idea. I think that would be kind of fun to really give that experience to a kid. Again, I don't have kids, but you know, I'd love to do that. This is the standard 2-child seat configuration. It is possible to get, you know, just the standard configuration with no child seat. That would be kind of the standard version. There's another version of this box that has like removable sidewalls. I haven't actually seen it yet, but I guess the idea is that these 2 portions on the side can be removed, so you can kind of put like a pallet or a crate across the center, which might be slightly wider. That's pretty cool. And I love that they're adding some of these like cargo accessories. I'll just speak to that just for a second, where they have they have the standard like tarpaulin top, so you can just use this box, no child seat, and just put this cloth cover on it, which by the way is made of recycled material as the this seat is as well, which I really appreciate that. And then you have the hard cover on the top, which is available, but then they have this like high hard top, which is really pretty impressive. And actually, in looking at that, I could see many commercial applications we might see, starting to use this type of system here, especially considering that this EPP box, as mentioned before, is insulated, so it kind of makes a lot of sense for that sort of application. But getting back to the child carrying configuration, this is a 2-child seat. You can add a couple different options. With the 2-child seats, if you wanted to, you can also add a mount for a baby seat, like a car seat. And that would actually just carry on one side, so you can do the baby seat and the child on the side, which I think is nice. So you also have the option for a 3rd child seat, which would be a rear-facing seat. And that can be used with this additional baby seat or the car seat, if you will. You do have that option. However, you wouldn't be able to use the 3rd child seat at the same time as this car seat. But it's nice to have that flexibility, because the reality is, many people start with a bike like this at a young family, and they kind of grow with the family over time, and to have all those options. I think the maximum amount of children you could probably carry on this bike at one time would probably be 3 children up front and then 1 in the back, which is pretty cool. But I gotta say, I'm still just kind of wrapping my head around all the different ways that this box can be used. I'm especially excited about some of these commercial applications, because really, from my side, we don't see enough of that in this space. I think the large majority of cargo bikes sold, at least in the US, are used for family, children carrying stuff, or perhaps dogs is a really big one. I think that this would work really well for dogs. I wonder if there's some options to maybe maybe with those removable sidewalls, maybe that's an easy way to load the dog. Again, I haven't seen that, so unfortunately I don't know that. Maybe I'll try to get some info on that, perhaps leave a comment about that. But actually, one thing that comes up a lot when children are sitting in this seat, and what ends up happening quite a bit, is they fall asleep. And this is a big challenge that parents have. It's what do you do with the kids, because their heads end up kind of flopping forward. I mean, I guess having the seat belts kind of holds them in, but this has one innovation which I really appreciate it. So if I reach my hand under here, there's a little lever, and I can pull the seat forward, and you could put it in this recline position. And at that point, their head will easily rest back here. They're secured in the seat, and they can take a nap while you're riding them around. I think this is something that really needs to be noted, and it's a really important detail. So I appreciate that they did this, and it's really exciting. They also made loads of improvements on their rain cover. This is something that some people had commented in the past. So they had little details that they wanted to improve upon it and that sort of thing. And I think they took all that feedback and they really went to town with it. Now they have a sun cover on there. They have all different heights that you can set it at. If you don't need it as high, you can drop it down a little bit lower, be a little bit more aerodynamic, that sort of stuff. I really do appreciate those little details that they included there. Some other little things you might be wondering, how much weight can I carry in here? I mean, it's 100 kilogram capacity up front, which is 220 pounds. It's funny because I did a video just recently about my top cargo bike picks for 2021, and someone commented that they picked another cargo bike because it had a larger weight capacity up front. And I commented back at, frankly, I'd be concerned about putting more than 220 pounds in the front of a cargo bike. Sure, a manufacturer might say that it's rated for that, but the reality is, can you actually handle that? I'd feel comfortable carrying 200 pounds up front. Would I feel comfortable carrying 300, 350? I think that's pushing it. So one of my concerns, as I voiced in that comment specifically, is the suspension. I don't really think that the suspension is specifically rated for that. And I'm actually going to try to get some details from Suntour on that topic, because I have to wonder, is that actually possible, or does that work? So I kind of didn't mention before when we mentioned the steering, but you can kind of see it a little bit in this box here. So it uses this cable steering for the bike, so it really gives this very wide turning radius. And I found that it can be quite helpful, especially riding in an urban environment, and we might need to turn around in a small street or that sort of thing. But they actually run the cables through the frame of the bike, so it's all hidden and clean. It's just really, really cool. So I don't want to rave about it too much. I mean, I don't know if there's anything to like pick on. I think, you know, some of the details that I talked about before, like, you know, it's just, you know, if you wanted a high-speed bike, you might want to consider one of the other models, like the Load, or suspension as well, like rear suspension. But I found, you know, with the low-speed bike, I don't know that you necessarily need that full suspension. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'm really interested to know what your thoughts are. I mean, I don't know, am I like unreasonable to be like overly excited about this bike? I mean, I guess you kind of have to ride it to really like get the full experience, but I think just, you know, being able to get to see and check out some of these innovations is really exciting and really kind of speaks to me like what Riese and Muller's into. But yeah, if you have any questions, comments, feedback, you know, leave them in the comments below. If you're interested in some help getting one of these bikes, we're always, you know, happy to help with that for sure. And just reach out to us. And I look forward to seeing you in a future video. Well, see you soon.